Thank you so much again.
Sure.
I think we're going to get started very soon.
Absolutely.
Good morning. I'm David Plazas. I'm the Opinion and Engagement Director for the Tennessean and the USA Today Network Tennessee. Welcome to a live broadcast with Secretary of State Trey Hargett of Tennessee, who is in his second term as Secretary of State.
Third
term.
Yeah.
I stand corrected. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. And I want to thank you so much for coming here to talk about elections, election security, voting. In 2020, we have a huge election, not just the presidential election, but several state elections, several local elections. And want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about what you're doing at the Secretary of State's office and what voters can be prepared for.
Well, thank you. And David, I know you and I both share a real passion for civic engagement. You know, for you and I, we probably vote, I don't say probably because I know we go vote every election. It's hard for us to comprehend that some people don't go vote, but this is, during a presidential year, we know this is when the highest turnout is. So we want people to be prepared to vote. In fact, we're advertising our online voter registration system on your website, as well as some other, Tennessee Tribune and others around the state. We want people to take advantage of online voter registration so we can get people engaged in the process and get them registered so they're able to vote on Election Day. And in fact, as you mentioned, we've got Super Tuesday coming up on March 3rd. So you got to be registered by February 3rd. That's the last day to register. We want people to do that online. You can certainly still do it by paper if you want to. And heck, we're just 36 days away from early voting starting on February 12th. So a lot of great things going on election-wise in 2020. We want people to be prepared to go and vote. I believe that it makes our government and our society stronger when people are more actively engaged in the political and electoral process, and I think this morning's an important part of that, so thank you.
Absolutely. And what can voters, especially new residents to Tennessee, what can they expect and what do they have to do in order to get registered to vote?
Well, I mean, first, obviously, you need to establish residency here. Once you establish residency here, if you have a Tennessee driver's license, if you have something that has your signature on file with the Department of Safety and Homeland Security, then you're able to register online. But you can certainly go to your local election commission website or go to our website and print off an old-fashioned voter registration form and mail that into your local election commission to be able to do that. And then we have a great app. It's called the Go Vote TN app. And you're able to download that. It's free of charge. You can find it on Google Play and on Apple as well. And that will tell you where your election precinct is, whether you're looking for early voting or election day. It'll tell you where you can vote. Also, we'll give you a sample ballot so you can be a prepared voter. Now, we don't typically have a problem with lines here in Tennessee on election day, and especially with the great early voting that we have here. But one of the things that can prevent long lines is be a prepared voter when you go in. Know who you're going to vote for. And so actually looking at a ballot before you go in to vote, instead of the first time you walk in, you look at your ballot, it's like, oh wow, I didn't know that was on the ballot. So be a prepared voter. Take your photo ID with you. A state or federally issued photo ID. And when we think about that, a lot of times we think about it have to be a current ID. It just has to be a valid one. So it can be an expired driver's license, expired military ID, state or federal, either way. So there are plenty of things you can do. And if you don't have an ID, contact us, and we are glad to help you trying to arrange to get an ID. Department of Safety will give you a free ID.
Well, that's excellent to hear because I know that there's a lot of questions about, whether or not voter ID access. I mean, you can use all sorts of things from your driver's license. You can have a state ID. You can use your concealed weapons license. You cannot use a college ID, for example.
That's correct.
So, what are some other things that people should know that they can't be able to use when they go to vote?
Well, I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, obviously, you probably can't use your local grocery store affinity card. So I think there are plenty of options there that people can use. And also I would say, sometimes things happen and people leave their ID at home. This is an important distinction I'm going to bring up. People have a right to get a provisional ballot. So you show up, you don't have your ID with you. If you decide, hey, I'm not going back home to get my ID right now, I encourage you, go ahead and cast a provisional ballot, and then you have the opportunity within a few days to come back to the local election commission, show your ID, and your vote is counted in that regard. One of the most frustrating things that happens on election day, and it really doesn't happen with IDs, a lot of times it happens with a voter registration where somebody thought they had registered to vote, but for some reason their voter registration hadn't been processed maybe for whatever reason, they have the right to cast provisional ballot. And people call us and say, well, I showed up and they didn't have my voter registration on file and I went home. And I have, for the last almost 12 years now, on election day, I wound up at least calling 1 or 2 people back on election day and saying, hey, go back and vote provisionally, go ahead and get your vote in. If we have a voter registration file or form for you, we will go back, work with the counties to make sure that your vote is accurately counted. So we want to make sure that people have that opportunity. Don't leave without casting that vote.
You graciously agreed to be at a forum last year with us at Lipscomb, or in 2018, pardon me, at Lipscomb University, about why Tennesseans aren't voting as they should. You know, at one point we were 50th in voting, voter turnout, 49th, and that was 2018 was a year where we saw remarkably better numbers than we have in the past. Why do you think that's happened here in the state, and what are you doing to help increase voter turnout and voter registration?
Well, we're doing things like this. You know, I look at voter registration. We need to make sure that we give people every opportunity to register, whether it's the old traditional method where they turn it into the local election commission, where they do it by mail, certainly using our online voter registration system, which has been very successful. In fact, last year we hit the half million voter mark who have either changed their address or registered to vote online. So, you know, it's up to us to try and make that as accessible as we can, and also ensuring the integrity of the process. One of the things that I think that we have in Tennessee, though, and I know, is if you I had saw somebody the day who compared our numbers to Georgia and Florida. Well, look at the last governor's race in Florida, how competitive that was versus how competitive ours was or wasn't. Look at the last governor's race in the state of Georgia, how competitive that was versus ours. Competitive races are what drive turnout. If you look at our statewide races, and even legislative races, congressional races by and large, if you look at the general election, they're not competitive. Competitive races are what drive turnout. And somebody one day said to me, he said, well, you know, I don't know if that's true. And I said, well, are you more likely to go see the University of Tennessee play Alabama? Are you more likely to go see them play University of Tennessee at Chattanooga? They said, well, I'd rather go see it play Alabama. And I said, well, it's a more competitive game, isn't it? They said, well, yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. So we tend to gravitate to those things whenever we believe that our vote matters, which is why this year, we started beginning talking about this last year, rolling this out. You're going to hear us talk a lot with people about how their vote matters. I can't guarantee you that your one vote is going to be the difference in Tennessee's electoral votes in deciding who the nominee is going to be or who our electoral votes are going to be for the presidency of the United States. I can't tell you that your one vote is going to make a difference. But I can tell you that I'd rather you cast that vote than not cast it, because you never know. We've had state house races that have been decided in the single digits. We had a congressional race a few years ago, you remember in the primary, decided by approximately 40 votes. You know, less than 0.1% of all the votes cast. And as a former candidate, and I will tell you that, and I've had losing candidates who've told me this story. One of the most painful things after you've lost a close race is you go to the Little League baseball field, you go to the grocery store, you go to church, what have you, and people look at you and say, gosh, I had no idea it was going to be close. I would have gone and voted. Well, the best way to make sure that you have a voice in your form of government is to go and vote. When you don't go do that, all you do is you relinquish the ability to have your say to those that do. And so I'll tell you a couple of stories, and I don't want to get too far off track here, but if you don't mind. I was at Mississippi State University a few years ago. We're doing a voter registration drive on a college campus, as we do every year. You know, really try to be engaged. And in fact, last year alone, we had 48 college campuses who conducted voter registration drives under our voter registration competition. And one young man, I become like a carnival barker when I'm at those, trying to get people to come in and get registered. And, you know, this young man says, I don't do politics. Kind of put his hand up to me. I said, I don't do politics. I said, well, you can say you don't do politics. Politics will be done to you. The bottom line is, whether or not you participate in this upcoming election, we're still going to elect a president of the United States. We're going to still elect a new U.S. senator. We're going to elect 9 U.S. congressmen. You know, you're going to elect, you know, local elected officials. You're going to elect your state legislators. So aren't we better off if we participate in that process? Now, on the flip side of that, I was at Motlow State a couple of years ago during the last presidential race, and someone said to me, I'm just not going to go vote. I said, well, good, you shouldn't. Give me all the power. And they said, what? And I said, when you don't go vote, all you're doing is making my vote that much more powerful. That college student who's 18 years old has the opportunity to cancel out the vote of the Secretary of State or add to the vote of the Secretary of State. We're all on equal footing. So I want people to understand that they have that power, because that is how we hold our form of government accountable. Now, to that end, I can say that very passionately, and as Tennessee's Secretary of State, that may resonate with about that many people out there, okay? What really matters is if we as individual citizens will engage in our own spheres of influence. Because I tell you what I think is happening right now. The environment is so shrill, and you and I have talked about this probably before. It is so shrill, and everybody slept a Holiday Inn Express last night, so they've got an opinion about something, or they know about something. And we tend not to engage with those around us and ask them, hey, are you registered to vote? Hey, I'm going to go vote. You want to ride with me? Or, hey, you are going to go vote, and a little peer pressure on that. To that end, a few years ago, we started, we have the I voted stickers that have the hashtag GoVoteTN on them. We encourage people to post that on their social media outlets, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever, because you are much more likely to go vote if you have a friend that's encouraged you to go vote, or a family member that's going to go vote, far more than the Secretary of State getting on the Tennessean YouTube channel or one of our local TV stations or seeing our advertisements somewhere. We have to be willing to engage those in close proximity to us and encourage them.
And I'm glad you talked about technology like Snapchat. But in talking about technology, there's a lot of concern about cyber hacking and election security, and that's a national conversation. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening in Tennessee when it comes to protecting our elections and making sure that people's votes are indeed counted as they should be?
Great question. It's a very timely question, and this is something that spans nationally, like you mentioned. In fact, I'll be going to our National Association of Secretaries of State conference later this month, and we will spend more time talking about election security than any other issue out there. And it's amazing the transition that's occurred over the last few years and how we talk about those things. First, I need people to understand your election machines are not hooked up to the internet. They're what's called air-gapped. So the election machine that you see, that you vote on election day, is not hooked up to the internet. And so that's important to know. There are a lot of things we're doing, and I'll try not to bore you with them. But number one, we work with the United States Department of Homeland Security, as well as the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security, as well as the Department of Finance and Administration's Office of Information Resources, and all those together working to make sure we have good intelligence, and also make sure we have the appropriate firewalls in place, that we have preventative measures to make sure that the voter registration rolls or our websites are protected. In fact, the voter registration rolls that we have require two-factor authentication for anybody to be able to log in and make any type of change from the local level into their voter registration rolls. So those things are important to know. But it's also about training. We've got 95 county election commissions out there, all of them with 95 different county election administrators, all of them with different county election commissions who, excuse me, we're having to work to make sure we train them and give them the appropriate tools they need. In fact, all 95 counties just recently qualified for a $25,000 cybersecurity grant that we use to Help America Vote Act funds that were recently appropriated to help them bolster their defenses. We're constantly training, people on what to watch out for. One of the most sensitive areas we have right now is the fishing expeditions, and that's with PHISH.
Right.
And we have found, and this is not just in the world of elections, but I have found if you offer people a Chick-fil-A gift card for something, they're liable to click on anything. So we want to make sure that people understand that we are always under attack. And you know this, because it's not just elections. The Tennessean website's under attack. The local bank here, their website's under attack. So there are a lot of bad actors out there who are doing everything they can to try and get into our system. My biggest concern when it comes to cybersecurity, honestly, is on election night and the things we're doing to protect our election night reporting system. I feel good about. I don't sleep poorly, but I also know that we always have to be one step ahead of the bad actors out there. And so I want you to imagine on election night, our election night reporting system, those results are unofficial, but let's imagine that on election night, back in 2016, it had showed Hillary Clinton winning the state of Tennessee. And imagine somebody had hacked in and changed the numbers on our website. Even those are unofficial numbers, and then we catch that, 2 hours later, the next morning, and realize, oh my gosh, we were hacked. And then we come back out and tell people, hey, Trump actually won Tennessee. Hillary Clinton did not win Tennessee. Well, the optics of that and the erosion in public trust from people who may be naturally cynical, or maybe not even naturally cynical, who think, oh yeah, what did y'all do behind the scenes to make that happen? Of course you did that, Trey. You're the Republican Secretary of State. You had to make sure your guy won. The Republicans won. That's not in reality what would have happened. But we'd have a hard time convincing people that's not what happened. The public trust would be diminished as a result of that. The second thing, and it probably feels like I talk about a lot more things than just one thing.
No, that's all right.
But misinformation is really important, something we're trying to tackle this time. And we're using a hashtag called hashtag TrustedInfo2020 that's being used nationally by the National Association of Secretaries of State. There are a lot of actors out there, both, and it's hard for us to believe this, foreign and domestic, who want to tear down our electoral process. And for some, for different reasons. For some, it's just to create discredit over whether, and distrust if their side loses, so they can point back and say, well, it wasn't really a real election, it was a rigged election. And let's keep in mind, back in 2016, both parties did that. The president, before the election ever occurred, said he had real concerns about the security of the election systems. And so instantly, people's radar went up and said, oh, I don't know that I have confidence in that. And the now president used the term rigged election. And I remember later on, after the president was elected and I was in D.C. for something, and one of the president's people, I was in a dinner with one of them one night, and I said, hey, I keep hearing about y'all talk about 3 million votes that were fraudulent votes. I said, I'm just going to tell you, I said, you can come to Tennessee and look for fraudulent votes, and when you leave Tennessee, you'll still be looking for 2,999,900 and something is what you'll be looking for.
Because there were only about 50 that you found.
Well, those are reported.
Okay, reported.
So, it's kind of like, it's a great point to bring out. Some things I don't know what gets reported and what doesn't, and somebody said, what do you mean by that? Well, we can't measure how many people were speeding on I-40 West today by the number of tickets that were given. Because I guarantee there's a lot more people speeding down I-40 than the number of tickets that were given. We don't have a rampant voter fraud problem in the state, in my opinion. I believe that our local election commissions on a bipartisan basis and the laws that have been put into place by the Tennessee General Assembly have done a lot to make sure that we have the highest of integrity in our elections. That doesn't mean, at the end of the day, that there's not a vote somewhere that should not have been cast, and a district attorney in some part of the state may choose to prosecute or not prosecute. So I don't know all those things. Those are the ones that are done. So when I go back to misinformation, we want to make sure people understand that we are the go-to source. Our website of govotetn.com, our app. Don't trust what somebody else who you have no idea who they are tells you is election day. You have the opportunity to go to our app and find out when election day is. And you'd be surprised, David, there are people out there who are very much in the know, who should be very knowledgeable, who say things that I know they should know better. And they'll tell people, hey, we're the first county to use this certain type of election machine. Actually, another county was using that election machine 2 years ago. They'll tell people what our law is regarding voter registration. No, not necessarily true. And these are people who have a powerful pulpit that people follow on social media. And I just want to tell people, go to the source. Go to the trusted source of information during this election season.
Now, there was great interest in your coming here, so we received a lot of questions. I don't know if we'll be able to get every single one of them, but one of the themes that came up was the issue of ex-felons wanting to receive their voter rights. There were some, their voter rights back. There was some concern that there were too many, if you had multiple charges, that you had to file multiple forms, for example. And with regard to that, there's a lot of conversation around that. Florida passed an amendment recently regarding that, and I know there's a lot of talk about criminal justice reform here in this state. When it comes to an ex-felon getting his or her rights restored, can that become more streamlined, or what is your perspective on that?
Well, I love that it'd be more streamlined, because I also believe that as felons are able to re-register to vote, I believe that gives them more, I hate to say it this way, skin in the game, more buy-in to the community, is one more way they're able to reintegrate back into society more effectively. That's a legislative issue. They're trying to make those determinations. What I will say this is, every person that calls our office, at 615-741-7956, we take every individual seriously and try and walk them through what they need. And I think a lot of times, and I hope no attorneys get upset with me saying this, I think that people think it's more complicated than it is potentially, and think they need to hire an attorney. So call us first and let's see what we need. And also, if you call us and we try and walk you through that, give us all the information, because one of the things we find is that sometimes people call and they give us about 3/4 of it, and then they forget to tell us, oh yeah, I was convicted in another state. And we're like, well, we didn't know about that. And so now you kind of wind up back at square one and trying to walk them through that. Those are hallelujah moments for us, though, anytime we're able to help people, regardless of what their situation is, felon or non-felon, who feels like they have some obstacle in the way, that we're able to get on the voter registration rolls and get them to exercise that franchise to vote.
So thank you. There was also a question when we discussed this before the broadcast about issues in Shelby County. Obviously, there were a lot of reports of voter registration forms that were incorrectly filed, and I know this has to do with legislation that is currently pending court review. But what can you say about any of that?
Well, what I can say is that we want to make sure that everybody out there who registers has the opportunity to complete form. That helps the voter whenever we get a complete form. Obviously, I can't comment too much on it because of the litigation that is in the courts right now. What I would encourage people to do, if you're going to register to vote, the easiest way to do it's online. I mean, because it won't let you finish that process without checking every box, filling out everything you need to. If you're filling out the paper form, I encourage you to fill out the state form. And make sure that if you can, turn it in yourself. Don't rely on somebody else to turn it in. And that's nothing nefarious. I mean, if you asked me to register to vote and I wasn't registered to vote and I gave you my form back, Dave, with all due respect, real life happens. And you get busy, and next thing you know, 30 days out is rolled around and you forgot to turn it in. And who's the person that's harmed by that? Me, because you didn't turn the form in. But I could have just turned it in myself. Something else, if I can circle back a little bit. One of the things we've heard about why people don't vote is they for some reason, they're scared of the process, that they don't understand what's going to happen. We work with Kix Brooks, and we have a video on our website that shows here's what you can expect when you go and vote, and kind of takes some of that mystery away from it. Because while you and I and others may walk into the voting precinct very confidently and know, okay, here's what I'm going to encounter every step of the way, for someone who has never done that, it may be a scary thing. And especially for somebody, perhaps whose maybe family wasn't engaged in the process and been told, hey, your vote doesn't matter, you shouldn't, we don't bother with that. It might be a daunting process. So we're doing everything we can to remove the mystery from what that looks like when people go in to vote, so they can understand it. Hey, there are people there who will help me. It's not going to be a scary process, and they can help me through that.
There was a question regarding voter registration purges. There's a lot of discussion about why people's voters are purged, and certainly when we look at the amount of voters this year versus last year. Could you explain that process? How does that work? And is there a certain amount of time that people have to vote, or a certain number of elections in order to keep on the rolls?
That's a great question, because as recently as yesterday, somebody pointed out to me a tweet from someone who knows better, and saying if you don't vote, and if you haven't voted in the last 2 federal elections, you're purged. It's not true. That used to be the law. Right now, unless we have some means of knowing that you no longer live at that address or that you have died, unless we have something concrete to show that your status has changed some way, you're not purged from our rolls in Tennessee. So you can go 10 years without voting, but you stayed at that address, you're still alive. We haven't received a death notice of any type. We haven't had the local election commission, I say we, the local election commission has had mail bounce back to them. You remain on the rolls. But that's a great example of things that are out there, of people who spread misinformation. And so what happens, that misinformation discourages people from voting. And we ought to be encouragers instead of discouragers, and instead of trying to cast a cloud over the process, let's remove the veil of secrecy, and let's make sure that people understand it. And that's why conversations like this are so important, to make sure that people understand what the laws are and they aren't.
Sure, and then people should know, looking at what you certified recently, is that there are competitive elections for the presidential primary. Even President Trump has primary opponents in the Republican primary.
That's right.
Now, in Tennessee, there's been a lot of discussion about who can vote in these partisan elections, and if I understand correctly, anyone can. You don't have to be a Republican or Democrat to vote in either of the primaries. Is that right?
That's a great question. So, I mean, you do not have to register by party in Tennessee. What I will tell you, and this seldom ever comes into play, if you come in the polls and you are known to be a lifelong Republican, lifelong Democrat, and you try and go in and vote in the opposite primary, someone has the right to challenge your party bona fides. During my time in office in the last 11 years, I bet that hasn't happened 11 times. But that could happen.
What does that mean, challenge your
So
party
someone,
bona fides?
you walk in and you say, I want to, in my case, lifelong Republican, I walk in and say, I'm here to vote in the Democrat Party primary. A Democrat, one of the Democrat poll workers, Democrat judges could look at that and say, yeah, I don't think you really remember the Democrat Party. I don't think that you really are a bona fide Democrat. They would have the opportunity to go back and look at my voting history and say, hey, Trey, you voted in a lot of Republican primaries. I don't see you voting in any Democrat primaries during the course of your voting history. I don't think you really mean that you're a Democrat. And there's a bipartisan group there that will make that decision whether or not I should have been able to vote in that primary.
Interesting.
That so rarely happens, and I'll tell you why it happens. At all 95 county election commissions are running these elections. These are the people you go to the grocery store with, the soccer games with, the football games, the church with, whatever it is. And so it's very awkward, if you've got neighbors standing around there for a neighbor to challenge a neighbor about whether or not they're a member of the party. We do have open primaries here in Tennessee.
What are some other things with regard to safeguarding one's vote and one's knowledge? What would you recommend when it comes to preparing for the polls? We talked a little bit about the app. We talked a little bit about the hashtags. Anytime if you're talking to someone that in your family or your friends, what is the checklist that they should make before going into the poll and casting that ballot?
I would just encourage you to be a prepared voter. Know what your ballot's going to look like, and know who you want to vote in those respective races. And every county is required to print the ballot in their newspaper, in hard print. They're required to do that. So you're certainly welcome to cut that out and make your check marks and be prepared to go into the polls. I think that's the best advice I can give you. Take the identification you need, and also want to encourage people, on your way out of the polls, grab one of the I voted stickers and take a picture of yourself and post that online. So that encourages others to go vote in the process.
But not at the voting machine, correct?
Not at the voting machine.
Could you repeat the hashtag and the phone number, please, for your office? So
the hashtag is #GoVoteTN. The phone number for our Division of Elections is 615-741-7956.
And we're coming soon to the end of this broadcast, but is there anything else on your mind that you think that voters need to know of, that citizens should know in order to become more civically engaged?
Well, I just think people need to pay attention to the world around them. And I think things are really good in this state in many, many ways. I think we've been very blessed. But I think we can't let up, and we have to make sure that we continue to hold government accountable by voting. I think we had to be educated consumers with our vote. I think we spend more time figuring out what the next smartphone we're going to buy is than who our elected officials are. And I think that needs to change. That doesn't mean we've made bad decisions. I think we've made a lot of good decisions, in the state, nationally, and locally. But be an educated consumer with your vote and understand that you need to vote your values, not my values, not your values, not the person sitting next to you or across the dinner table from you. Vote your values and understand why you feel the way you feel. So that's what I would share.
And it's worth reminding voters that it's not just the presidential primary on March 3rd. You have got congressional races. You've got some local races as well.
You'll have some local races here in your listenership area. But also in August, you'll have the congressional primaries. So that's when you'll have your state and federal primaries. It's important to note in the Super Tuesday, early voting typically goes this way. People typically vote early. In fact, in November of 2016, almost 2/3 of the people voted early. In March, they won't. It'll be 1/3 of people who typically vote early because they want to make sure that their candidate is in the race. Because what can happen, we've seen this before, a candidate's in the race during early voting. By the time Election Day rolls in Tennessee, they've withdrawn from the race. So you will see more people come out on Election Day.
Well, Secretary Trey Hargett, we want to thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you very much in your service and your leadership to the state and to the community, and best of success to your office.
Thanks, David. I think it's brave of you to have me on the morning that the Bonnaroo lineup came out.
Well, it's good. Well, you and Lizzo, it's great. Well, thank you very much, viewers of the Tennessean and USA Today Network Tennessee across the state. We want to thank you. You can replay this broadcast and join us for future live broadcasts as well here on Tennessean.com or across your USA Today Tennessee website. Thank you very much and have a great day.